Hello everybody, Mobius Y here with another video for Stellaris Console Edition. Today's video is going to be discussing one of the unique mechanics of the game, and this video will be about designating special colonies, which is one of the facets of planet management introduced with version 2.2. Now before continuing with the video, if you'd like to see more Stellaris Console Edition content, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to be notified when I upload a new video. I normally upload at least once per week as per my stream schedule, and sometimes more. Now this mechanics video will be somewhat unscripted, but I still intend to cover the topic in great detail. The goal is that by the end of this long video you will have learned something. The three main types of colonies I wanted to cover were Penal Colonies, Resort Worlds, and Thrall Worlds. But for this video I'd also like to go over Fortress Worlds with you. So let's get started, beginning with Penal Colonies. So here in my empire I have the Penal Colony Australia that I have created for the purposes of this video. Now a penal colony can only be created on size 15 or larger worlds. It can't be created on anything smaller than that. The Penal Colony Planet Modifier reduces crime by 25% on all other colonies in your empire. The Penal Colony itself gains plus 100% crime generation, meaning that any crime that is produced from unhappy pops is doubled from the normal amount of crime that they generate. The Penal Colony also gains 33% additional immigration pull, which increases pop growth speed. This represents all the criminals throughout your empire being sent to the Penal Colony to work for the rest of their lives. Now on a penal colony, a lot of it is very much like a regular colony. You can still construct all types of districts and buildings on the surface of the colony to produce jobs for the population that is living there. So what can a penal colony do for you and your empire? Well, the obvious use of a penal colony is to reduce crime on all other colonies, lessening the need for precinct house buildings in order to create enforcer jobs which reduce crime on the other colonies. However, there are a couple of obscure uses for a penal colony that can be applied with a little out-of-the-box thinking. The first obscure use that you can use it for is you can have a high-stability penal colony by allowing crime and then enacting the Negotiate with Crime Lords planetary decision, which unfortunately I don't have in this particular example here, as I don't have enough crime on this planet. However, the Negotiate with Crime Lords planetary decision, your planet needs at least 10% crime, I do believe, and when you enact that planetary decision, it adds plus 10% stability and plus 50% crime. Now, more stability is actually quite good on any planet because more stability leads to more output of resources from your pops, and a high stability penal colony can be pretty dang productive. For every percentage of additional stability above, I believe it's 50%, you get 0.6% additional resources from jobs. So for example, on this particular penal colony, which has 70% stability, right now the resources from jobs are being increased by plus 20%, or sorry, plus 12%. The trade value is being increased by plus 12%, and the immigration pull is being increased by another plus 8, further increasing the growth speed on this particular colony. So you can actually use that to your advantage. The other thing that negotiating with crime lords does is that the negative events that usually happen in your colonies with high crime, such as terror attacks, they never trigger because you've negotiated with the crime lords to continue doing what they do. The one negative could be that you get some criminal jobs with the high crime rate on your planet, and they tend to not be very productive. In fact, they take away a couple resources per month from that colony in question. But apart from that, the benefits that you get from the higher stability from negotiating with the crime lords far outweigh the couple negatives that you might get from having 3 or 4 criminal pops. Another obscure use that you could have for a penal colony is you can use it to increase the growth speed on the planet through its immigration pull. This can help you to grow pops on the planet more quickly with the bonus to immigration. This is really good for adding more pops more quickly to a high-value planet where you want to maximize its resource output as soon as possible. For example, maybe that nice new shiny Ecumenopolis that you just took from the Materialist Fallen Empire or found in the Fenhabanis home system of the First League. By making it a penal colony, you increase the immigration pull and the pop growth speed on that Ecumenopolis will be increased. That's just one example. Other high-value planets that you could turn into a penal colony would have increased growth speed so that you can get pops working those jobs and creating resources on that particular world for you far more quickly. Now, for penal colonies, there is a limit of 1 penal colony per empire, and at any time you can use the Abolish Penal Colony planetary decision for a cost of 250 influence. It does remove the negatives of the modifiers from it being a penal colony, but your other empire's colonies also might have a small jump in crime when you do that. Now let's talk about resort worlds. So a resort world cannot be created on an already established colony. There must be 0 districts and buildings in order to create a resort world. A resort world also cannot only be created on a size 15 or larger world, and the resort world modifier adds plus 15% amenities production to all other empire colonies and increases their immigration pool by 15%. So this increases the amount of amenities on your other colonies and increases their overall pop growth speed for organic pops. The resort world itself gains 100% habitability for organic pops, and it gains an additional clerk job for every 2 pops on the colony. Now, when you designate a colony as a resort world, you cannot construct any districts on the entire world, and most buildings are restricted from being constructed on the resort world. As you can see, the number of options here for available buildings is very, very small on a resort world. Also, when you designate a colony as a resort world, the capital building becomes a resort capital complex. So for a resort world, I suggest using paradise domes for housing, or I should say luxury residences and paradise domes for housing, and either commercial zones or even strongholds to create additional jobs for the population to work in. This will create either clerk or soldier jobs for the population that is living on the resort world. The real struggle on a resort world is balancing the housing and the available jobs without any districts and only using a very limited amount of buildings available to construct. So the 2 obvious uses for creating a resort world within your empire is, first off, it increases the amenities output on all other colonies, throughout the empire. There are not many bonuses to amenities in the game. There are a couple small reductions in how many amenities your pops require. I do believe there's one that reduces it by 5%, and there's also other production increases. For example, what's it called? Artificial moral codes technology increases amenities production by 5%. There's also the Ascension perk, One Vision, which reduces the amenities usage for your organic pops by a further 10%. But beyond that, there's not many bonuses to amenities in the game, and this one is the largest value bonus of 15%. The rest are only either 5 or 10%, either reduced in amenities usage or increased amenities production. And the other thing that this increases is immigration pull on all of your other colonies, which increases their organic pop growth speed. So this can be used to further increase the growth speed on the other colonies throughout your empire. Of course, there are a couple of obscure uses for a resort world as well. You could have the resort world specialize in clerks producing trade value by constructing those luxury residences to create housing and using commercial zones to create jobs. A single commercial zone building creates 5 clerk jobs. So you can have a single resort world with a lot of clerks on it producing a lot of trade value for you. And of course, depending on your trade policy, you'll be generating extra energy credits or even a little bit of consumer goods or unity with those with that trade value that your resort world is drastically producing. Another obscure use for the resort world is that any secondary species with a different climate preference that winds up in your empire, if they have a climate preference that differs from your main species that you started with, you can resettle those secondary species to your resort world because the resort world has 100% habitability. If you're having difficulty finding jobs for those other pops from different species and making sure that they're productive because they're unhappy on their non-natural climates, you can move them to the resort world and just have them work those clerk or soldier jobs, and they'll be more efficient at it because they're on a high habitability world, and they'll be happier because of it. Of course, you can get those secondary species from numerous other means. It could be pops you have enslaved, primitives you've uplifted, a vassal you have integrated, or even refugees that you've gotten from other empires that are on the losing end of a war. There's numerous ways that you can get other species with different climates throughout your empire, so you could use a resort world to resettle those pops to the resort world where they are much more comfortable with the climate there. Now, just like a penal colony, resort worlds, there is a limit of 1 per empire, and there is the abolish planetary resort decision, which removes the resort world modifier at any time for 250 influence. And finally, for unique colonies, we have Thrall Worlds. So here in my empire, I have the Norilsk Gulag, which I have designated as a Thrall Worlds. Now, just like a resort world, a Thrall World cannot be created on an already established colony. There must be 0 districts and buildings in order to designate a colony as a Thrall World. Also, the Thrall World can only be created on a colony with at least 1 fully enslaved pop on it. You cannot have free citizens on that Thrall World, on the world you want to create a Thrall World. You cannot have it populated entirely by free citizens. You need at least 1 slave on that colony before you can designate it a Thrall World. You also cannot turn a habitat or ecumenopolis into a Thrall World. So the Thrall World modifier adds plus 50% to pop growth speed on the colony, which is a significant bonus, pretty much the highest in the game. So the Thrall World will only grow new pops from enslaved species once it has been designated as a Thrall World. In order for free pops with full citizenships to work specific jobs that you need them to on a Thrall World, they need to be resettled here in order to fill those open job slots. So on a Thrall World, you cannot construct city districts, and most types of buildings are restricted. As you can see, there's a very limited amount of buildings that you can, or types of buildings, I should say, that you can construct here. I've already created a slave processing facility. You can only have 1, and I already have a food processing center as well. Those are 2 additional building types that you can create on the Thrall World, on top of the ones that you see here. Once you designate a colony as a Thrall World, you can also build slave huts and overseer residences to create both housing and overseer jobs, respectively. And once you designate a colony as a Thrall World, the capital building becomes the governor's estates. So again, a different type of capital building from your regular colonies. So one of the special slave jobs includes overseers. These reduce crime on the Thrall World. So they basically act like enforcers. They keep the other slaves in line, and in order to have overseers, or more overseers to reduce crime if necessary, you need to create or construct these overseer residence buildings in building slots. And another special type of Thrall World job is the toiler. These are unemployed slaves. If they are unable to find a regular job, they become a toiler. They don't simply become unemployed. Toilers produce some additional amenities for the other slaves on the Thrall World. Now, ruler jobs such as administrators are still present on the Thrall World, but they require a pop with full citizenship in order to work those jobs. Slaves cannot fill ruler jobs because slaves are always kept down in the workers' stratum, or mostly kept down in the workers' stratum. So if you need additional rulers, for example, administrators working on this planet, you need to resettle some pops, for some free pops that have full citizenship. So on a Thrall World, housing can be an issue without being able to build any city districts. This will require the use of these special slave huts buildings. Constructing one of these buildings creates 8 housing, just like a city district. Amenities will also be an issue on a Thrall World. Only administrators and the capital building itself produce amenities for your Thrall World. Any additional amenities requires unemployed toiler pops, which is kind of not an efficient use for your slaves, because you do want them to be either working as miners or farmers or whatever else, producing resources for use in the entire empire. So an obvious use for your Thrall World is to have it producing a large amount of food by creating as many farmer jobs as possible, both with agriculture districts and with hydroponics farms buildings on the colony itself. This will increase, you can further increase productivity of food with the food processing plant and slave processing facility buildings. So this will reduce the need for you to be producing food on other colonies. As you can see in planet production there near the top of the screen, this particular Thrall World is currently producing 337 total food. So I could reduce the number of agriculture districts on some of my other colonies in my empire because they're simply not needed, as this particular Thrall World is actually producing a lot of food for the empire. Another obvious use for a Thrall World is to increase your naval capacity by constructing stronghold and upgrading them to fortress buildings to create soldier jobs. So a Thrall World is actually pretty dang good for that, because stronghold and fortress buildings, not only do they create jobs, but they create the same amount of housing as they do jobs. So it's a lot easier to manage a Thrall World that you're developing into a soldier naval capacity generator. One of the obscure uses for your Thrall World is that the high growth speed creates slave pops at an accelerated rate. So this makes the Thrall World ideal for resettling slaves to new colonies, as the slaves that you've resettled away from the Thrall World will be replaced fairly quickly. As you can see here, the current growth speed of this particular slave is 10.07 per month. So in less than a year, if I resettled a single slave pop, in less than a year it will have been replaced through growth alone. Another obscure use for the Thrall World is that it quickly creates new slaves that you can sell on the slave market to help with overcrowding. Now, this particular gimmick is only available with the Megacorp DLC, which at the time of recording this, we don't actually have. But once we do get that DLC, that is something to consider. You can create a Thrall World or a couple Thrall Worlds with really high amounts of growth speed of your slaves, and then you can sell those slaves on the slave market to make yourself some additional extra income for your empire. And of course, just like the other unique worlds, the Thrall World modifier can be removed at any time for a cost of 250 influence. So now that I've discussed the three unique colonies, I want to go over the Fortress World with you next, and here I have Gibraltar to take a look at. So a fortress world is auto-designated when you construct enough stronghold or fortress buildings to create soldier jobs on any one of your colonies. A planet designated a fortress world reduces bombardment damage by 10% and increases defense army damage by 10%. So why did I want to talk to you about fortress worlds, and why do I feel that they are important? The reason should be quite obvious. Fortress worlds increase your naval capacity by a lot. For each soldier that is working on a fortress world, it is producing 4 additional points of naval capacity. And here on Gibraltar, I have 30 soldiers. Each one is producing 4 naval capacity. That is 120 additional naval capacity. And I don't even have this colony fully developed yet. The naval capacity that can be created on a single fortress world greatly exceeds the naval capacity that you can get from star bases. This leaves your star bases to be converted into much more useful bastions or trade hubs. So just for clarity's sake, I have Orem Station here. It is an anchorage. For each anchorage module on Orem Station, it's producing 6 points of naval capacity for a total of 36 points of naval capacity. So it's producing barely a little over a quarter of what Gibraltar is on a single planet. So for me personally, I feel that fortress worlds are far more efficient for creating additional naval capacity. An obscure use for the fortress world is that the fortress building creates an FTL inhibitor in this particular star system. What an FTL inhibitor does is it prevents enemy fleets from leaving that star system unless they leave via the same hyperlane that they used to enter the star system. So if you have a fortress world in a key choke point, it can create a significant obstacle for invading fleets to progress deeper into your territory with. Say, for example, we had a fortress world here in Orim. If anybody was invading from the direction of Castor, they would have to deal with that fortress world before they can progress onward deeper into my territory towards my capital world. And the same thing would be if they're coming in from the other direction. If they come from Elathion to Orim, they have to deal with that FTL inhibitor on the fortress world before they can progress further into any of my territory in the opposite direction. So this can really buy you a lot of time to build up your defenses, because your enemies have 3 options to deal with a fortress world. They can bomb the planet into a tomb world by creating enough devastation through bombardment. Once it hits 100% devastation, it becomes a tomb world. They can invade the planet and successfully occupy it, or they can use a planet killer weapon, from a Colossus ship. So bombing planets to extinction takes a very long time by default, and a fortress world naturally reduces bombardment damage by 10%. So this makes it just take even that much longer. But on top of that, you can also construct a planetary shield generator special building on your fortress worlds, which further reduces orbital bombardment damage by 50%. This could cause enemy fleets to spend years, if not decades, bombing a single fortress world if it has a planetary shield generator. It just might not be worth it for them to stick around that long and bomb it in order to simply proceed with their invasion into your territory. The other option for them, invading the planet, that will also prove extremely difficult, as soldier jobs also generate defense armies to increase the strength of the planet's garrison. As you can see here on Gibraltar, the garrison strength is over 7,200. Excuse me. This would require a pretty powerful assault army to successfully invade it. It's entirely possible to spend enough time to recruit enough armies in order to successfully invade this planet, but that require a lot of resources to recruit those armies, and a lot of those armies would wind up getting lost in the ensuing battle. The last option would be using a Colossus ship to destroy the planet, either with a world cracker or a global pacifier to turn it into a shield world. And this could be very risky for anybody seeking to invade your territory, as your military fleets could attack that Colossus that is attempting to destroy your fortress world. But it is the safest and the quickest choice for people who are trying to invade your territory and actually deal with that pesky FTL inhibitor. On the other hand, though, any planet killer weapon on a Colossus besides the neutron sweep will render that colony useless to your enemies, when colonies are extremely valuable. So if it's a very large planet-sized colony, say this was a size 24 planet with some good planetary features, for maybe it has some mote harvesting traps available, this would be a very valuable colony for your enemies to use. And if they use a world cracker to blow it up, or a global pacifier to turn it into a shielded world, it becomes useless for them to try and take it over from you. A neutron sweep, on the other hand, which would kill the entire population on it, could be their best choice. And of course, Colossus is only available if you have the Apocalypse DLC installed. So if you're playing without the Apocalypse DLC, or you're in a multiplayer game where the host does not have Apocalypse, then that just further restricts their options. So the number one issue with creating a fortress world is that it requires a lot of volatile motes for upkeep, because the fortress building requires 1 volatile mote per month worth of upkeep. To compensate for this, you'll need to build the chemical lab buildings on other colonies. These chemical plants convert minerals into volatile motes. So you want at least 1 or 2 of these on pretty much every other colony throughout your empire in order to compensate for the huge amount of volatile motes being used as upkeep on your various fortress worlds. The other nice thing about fortress worlds is that they can still produce basic resources from the available districts on the planet. For example, you can still construct your generator, mining, and agriculture districts in order to produce the basic resources, so they can still help your overall economy beyond just creating a whole bunch of naval capacity for your military fleets. And that should sum it up for this video. So to recap, we covered how to enact a decision to turn a colony into a special type of world, how you can use these unique colonies to your benefit, and the importance of fortress worlds. Now do be aware that I didn't mention anything about hive minds or machine empires, and that's because those three unique colony types, the resort worlds, the Thrall worlds, and the penal colonies, are only available to normal organic empires. I hope this video has been helpful for new and old players alike learning these mechanics that came with the version 2.2 update. If you want to see more videos such as this one, please subscribe to the channel, as there will be additional mechanics videos in the future. And leave a thumbs up if you found this one educational or entertaining. Don't forget to check out the links in the description below. You'll find a link to the official Stellaris Discord, where you can be a part of the greater Stellaris community. You'll also find a link to my Twitch channel, where I stream Stellaris Console Edition at least once per week, and also my Twitter feed, where you can give me a follow and stay up to date on important announcements. And last but not least, my own private Discord channel for fans of my content to freely join. It's not mandatory, but I highly recommend it so you can take part in viewer polls and community events. Thanks very much for watching. This is Mobius signing off for now, and I hope to see you again real soon.